1941's The Maltese Falcon review and thoughts. By God, sir, this film has character. There's never any telling what it'll say or do next, except it's bound to be something astonishing. I'll tell you right out, I am a man who likes talking about men who like to talk. And that's probably going to be as much impersonation as I'm going to do this video, because I'm not very good at impersonating the characters in this movie. This movie is indeed the stuff the cinematic dreams are made of. There, it appears to be legally required to put in your review. I'm not saying I disagree with it. When they're right, they're right. You might think this month is November, but you are incorrect. It is Noirvember. So has it been deemed by us. Who are we? Me and other film noir nerds. Noirds, if you will. I accept it if you will not. So I've been going over exactly how best to open this. I know that a number of people today don't know that much about film noir, so you can think of it a bit as a lot of people are familiar with the Sin City movies. Those are basically noir, but with like a jab of adrenaline, so yeah, think that, only not quite as fast-paced, and yeah. And if you're not familiar with those either, you could think something like a Quentin Tarantino movie from this time, so, you know, going along. That goes for the Sin City comparison as well. You know, they can't show and say exactly the same things. But yeah, if it were Quentin Tarantino, just, you know, without the digressions and pop culture references and that sort of thing, and more specifically focused on, this is very much, not all of these film noir are, but many, it's like there's some kind of mystery or otherwise, you know, sort of someone has been killed, or some people are talking about killing someone, and yeah. Now, let's see, yeah, to start with, this was directed, I did not write down his name, written and directed by John Huston. I'm not that familiar with his other work. The others I've seen are Moby Dick and Freud. You know, he does well at both. It has been, yeah, I don't know, almost 2 decades since I watched Freud. I'd only watched it once. Maybe it doesn't hold up, but yeah, very, very talented, and I know there's other stuff of his I definitely gotta watch. Now, yeah. While I admit to overall liking The Big Sleep more than this, on account of Bacall, the romance and relationship between her and Bogey, and other than those three, you know, these two movies are amazing in all the same ways, this had me gripped throughout. I love noir. This is one of the best of them. Required viewing for any fan of the genre. And yeah, you know, there is a lot of uncertainty. Who can you trust? Where will the money come from? You know, these are issues that breed the kind of people that the movie is populated with. And I think that might about cover. Now, yeah, so if I recall, you know, it's been a while since I watched Double Indemnity and The Big Sleep. From what I remember, those are not quite as expressionistic in the camera work as this. Certainly, this one is more expressionistic than The Postman Always Rings Twice. And I just realized though I mentioned that this is Noirvember, I did neglect to mention, yes, this is the first of 4 reviews I'll do, 1 per week, of this month of classic noir cinema. Some people say that this movie is boring without explaining at all what aspect of it they're referring to. It's very fast-paced, the characters are compelling, the story keeps you guessing. What I think they may be referring to is that it is a fairly talky movie. There's a lot of dialogue. Tension often comes down to verbal threats and people revealing something major. And certainly, if those things might bore you, yeah, the movie might bore you. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, movies have changed a lot. You know, this movie is, what, 83 years old now. No one who worked on it is still alive. If you were old enough to watch it when it originally came out, yeah, no one is still alive who was old enough to watch. It's possible that there were people who did watch it, but this is definitely, like, technically ratings work different back then, and it's not like the most violent. A lot of stuff is just implied, but I would not really show this to someone under the age of like 15 or 16. And yeah, we have a lot of funny, clever, sharp, swiftly delivered dialogue, smooth, witty, crisp, incredibly quotable. And let's see. Right, one person wrote in a review, even the most uneducated random person on the street talks like an academic with a master's in English. Yeah, you're welcome. This is accurately described as hard-boiled. It is important to keep in mind that hard-boiled meant something very different back, I want to say it was the 70s when it became a bit more like what we think of hard-boiled as today, and gritty and such, where it was more like these kind of, there was a bit more grunge, dirt filth, where, when this was made, like, yeah, these are, it's very hard-boiled, but, like, the men wear suits. Great ones, too. And, people don't tend to look, like, incredibly, like, roughed up, even if they've faced violence, so, yeah, this is not Scorsese hard-boiled, for example, or Tarantino. So there's a lot that I really want to talk about that I can't talk about without spoilers, so I will talk about stuff like gender politics and the representation of other minority groups when I get into the spoiler section. If you want to jump ahead to that, the description will have time codes for that. Yeah, it is a very intense film. I've already mentioned that it moves quite fast. Like, every single scene, there's no wasted time in this. Every single scene of this movie will develop character and or plot, or in some way, maybe there'll be a reveal, some information that changes things that have been set up prior. And yeah, it does pretty much open with a death, and you spend some of the movie trying to figure out who killed that person and why. And by the end of the movie, I'm not going to give the answers before I get into the spoiler section, and I might not there. You can look it up, but I'm not going to give away the answers here. But I will say that by the end, yeah, everything has been answered. This is not one of those, oh, the mystery is an end into itself. No, this very much considers a mystery a means to an end. You have to answer the mystery, and the mystery has to say something about the people that are involved and the world that they inhabit. There are people who don't love the ending of this movie, and then there are people who are right. I'm joking. It's perfectly fine if you don't like the ending. I think it is pitch perfect. I would not change a single thing about the ending. I would barely change anything about the movie as a whole, really. But it does not have a tremendous amount of actual on-screen physical violence. The intensity that pervades the entire thing tends to be in people's faces, in their eyes, in their words. The kinds of things. There's a lot of threats in this movie, and while not all of them are acted upon, you do feel like, okay, no, they might literally do that. There's a lot of machismo, and I have a mixed relationship with machismo. There are definitely times where I enjoy it tremendously. I find it frustrating when a piece of media just indulges in machismo without at all criticizing it, or without like, or yeah, or if it is just supposed to like look cool, especially the times where like characters that otherwise seem really sensible will just do something, macho, not by itself, because that is sadly accurate. There's a lot of, hyper masculine guys who can't handle the slightest insult, even if they are otherwise, in control of themselves, and but without, or rather, but the piece of media is trying to make us like cheer at it, like as if machismo is inherently good when it's done significant damage throughout history. And I don't know if I want to give away exactly which one this is until I get into the spoilers, but I will say I do think this handles machismo rather well. And yeah, there's a lot of machismo on display, and it is in part this thing of like the circumstances kind of lead to people being very, taking certain actions. I suppose that might actually be just about what I can say without spoilers. Right, there is actually, let's see, I wrote it down on the, if the thing will work. There we go. So, right. Yes, the, here we go. Or maybe we don't. Okay, this is definitely too much dead air. So, yeah. This has some fantastic, I already mentioned expressionistic cinematography. That was one of the major things of film noir. And it's not true of all of them, but it definitely is something that people remember. And you probably have seen this stuff referenced, even if you've never watched something that is technically noir. And, one of the things is, one of the first shots of this movie, the camera pans from the subjects, from the people, down to the floor, and you see, like, it's a private investigator's office, so they have their names on the window, and you see on the floor, like, where the sunlight has hit, and so it's, like, written on the floor, the names. And it uses camera angles that were not the most, usual. I saw somewhere that they refer to it as Dutch angle, and I think that is accurate. I do want to clarify, it's not doing the thing where the camera is like tilted to the side, which, slightly overused in Thor 1, I can imagine that. Extremely overused in Battlefield Earth. Here it's more that the camera, rather than being straight on, it's like from down below, making someone look bigger, for example. And yeah, high contrast lighting, just absolutely incredible, and the kind of stuff you did not see in American movies. Like, you really, if you wanted to see stuff like that, you basically had to watch a German movie, which in 1941 was not the easiest thing for an American to accomplish, for some reason. Seriously though, I cannot put into words how happy I am that, obviously anyone who escaped the Nazis, wonderful. Some of them, like, made absolutely indelible impressions on the art of cinema. One of them is Fritz Lang, who didn't work on this. But I cannot talk expressionism without bringing up, like, just, if you've never watched a Fritz Lang movie, treat yourself. They're amazing. I haven't watched as many as I would like, but M, Metropolis, and let's see, what was it called? It was one of the Dr. Mabuse films, but I forget the exact time. Maybe the Testament of Dr. Mabuse. Absolutely spectacular. I will say I don't remember Dr. Mabuse quite as much, but the other two, like it's unreal how good they are. But one of the other ones is Peter Lorre, who steals so much of this movie. Just incredible. I will talk about the acting performances once I get into the thought sections, but it's difficult to talk very much about them without spoiling anything. This is very much one of those where you shouldn't know very much going in. He's been imitated quite a bit, and yeah, as an adaptation, it does do a really great job. They pretty much tried to just adapt it directly, which I really appreciate. I have not watched the other two, so the first, this is the third. I forget if there are more. I can imagine there are more after this. Certainly some of these film noirs had remakes later. I have not watched very many of those. I love neo-noir. I'm not super interested in remakes of, these original film noir classics. I'm more interested in stuff that's just like, new, but neo-noir. Neo-noir. And, yeah, the original Maltese Falcon, believe it's from 1931. Haven't watched it. I do hear that it is like, they changed some things, and one of the things that apparently really was unpopular with critics was that Sam Spade is a bit of a playboy in that one, and yeah, I definitely prefer, I do think that character should be this more hard-boiled, like, yes, women like him, he likes women, it's not really yeah, I get it, I get why they felt that would be appealing, but yeah, this was definitely the better way to go, and this is also the more beloved film, in part for that reason. The second film, I want to say 1936, it was called something like Satan Met a Lady, which I do appreciate. Sam Spade is described as looking like Satan in the book, so that works. That one's apparently a comedy. I love comedy. I love comedy from this time period. Like, do not get me started talking about Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, but I don't think that this story should be a comedy. There are, I suppose, not necessarily quite laughs, but smirks to be had in this movie on account of all the clever dialogue and such, but yeah, turning this into a straight comedy, I'm really glad that they got another chance to, yeah. The film was one of the first for John Huston, and I believe it was the actual first lead role for Bogey, and the rest is history. He did a bunch of these and is rightfully beloved. When I say these, not all of them were film noir, but he did a bunch of roles where he plays, someone that there's a hardened edge to them, and yeah, he was so good at it. And yeah, the film, one of the reasons that they got to make it, despite it's the third try, and the lead actor is untested, and there was apparently, he wasn't the top choice, but the top choice did turn it down, and so he ended up, one of the reasons was it's not super expensive, and it's not one of those, when you think inexpensive movie, not for everyone, but for me, for a while, Roger Corman was what I thought of, and Roger Corman movies, the ones I've seen, I've watched, haven't watched all of them, but let's see, what is it, 4 total, I want to say, all of them look quite cheap, and this is not that. This doesn't feel like they didn't have a lot of money, because the things that make it not cost an awful lot of money are completely motivated by the story. Like, there's a lot of interior shooting, not a huge cast. And also some of the actors were not, huge names, so not a lot of money spent there, Yeah, completely motivated. It really wouldn't make sense. Like, chunk of this movie is like people talking about secrets. It really wouldn't make sense if they were out in public. That's something we're seeing more today to make some of these more visually interesting. That's something Tenet got criticism for. Why are these spies discussing their plan in plain view and earshot? Now, I think that does pretty much cover. Yeah, the DVD is worth getting. Other than the movie, it has a 32, I want to say, minute behind the scenes, and it has this, right? Yeah, obviously the digital transfer, yada yada yada. No surprise there. And yeah, there's a commentary track by a Bogart biographer named Eric Lax, and it has this thing called Warner Night at the Movies 1941, where they recreate the experience of going into a movie theater to watch this movie. So, in addition to playing the movie itself, it will play a vintage newsreel, a musical short called The Gay Parisian, 2 classic cartoons. Let's see. I don't know if that's racist, so I'm just going to call it Rabbit Hunt, and Meet John Doughboy, and a trailer of 1941 Sergeant York. And this is actually something I've seen on several, my copy of the 1937, I want to say, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Errol Flynn, amazing, has the same thing. If you love really old movies like this, if you're trying to it might be worth trying to find, at least on sale. I always say buy on sale if at all you can, but see if you, that's what I do. See if you can find one of these instead of just finding somewhere to stream it if you really want the full experience. It wasn't what I did this time, but I've done it other times. And yeah, it really does add to the experience, the authenticity. And I think that might actually cover all of the yeah, there's not really anything else I can get into without spoilers. So yeah, I rate this 10 film noir masterpieces out of 10, and we are going to get into the thoughts section. So I'm just going to note real quick how far into the video that is, and there we go. So, right, let's see. I think I will start. Yeah, so yeah, I did write some stuff down, and then I'll go off what I remember. So yeah, the let's see. Yes, I realize at the time some saw it as romantic, but it is sexual assault that Sam kisses Bridget without being sure if she wanted him to. If not verbal consent, at least nonverbal. And I realize the idea is supposed to be that she says, "What else can I offer you?" Because he said, "What have you offered me except money? Have you ever offered my trust?" And she says, "What else can I offer you?" The idea is supposed to be that that's, yeah. But I do think they could have made that clearer. And yeah, this movie was made at a time when consent wasn't really thought of as like, yeah, a thing. It was seen as, that it was good if the man makes the decision for when they should, yeah. And yeah, for the record, I don't blame any woman for being a femme fatale during times of need. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And, yeah, I think it's ridiculous to claim that women are inherently less trustworthy. When you really look at it, like, it tends to be that when a woman lies or otherwise deceives, it's in some way, it can be traced back to patriarchy. Whereas a number of men will lie just because they're bored, or they want something and they don't think they can get it if they're honest, and they'd rather lie than not have that thing, even if it's something that you absolutely should not lie about. Yeah. And yeah, at one point Bridget tells Sam she's all alone, has nobody, and we later realize she's responsible for that. Floyd would likely have protected her if she hadn't made sure he got killed. Archer was ready to protect her, but she shot him to get rid of Floyd. She's a Black Widow, making sure she is all alone so she can lure more men close to her. Like Sam said, she probably would have eventually turned him in or shot him, the way that she also dealt with Floyd. So yeah, I think they do quite a good job there. Now, she's not, as femme fatales go, some of the others will like straight up shoot the man that they are, that they have lured in. And this is not that, but I do think this is an interesting take on the femme fatale. At one point she does, when she, let's see, I think it might be Wilmer's gun she grabs, that he's trying to attack Sam. Sam stops him. The gun lands on the floor. She picks it up, and she doesn't act like she's scared of it. She's holding it like she might fire. And Sam gets it from her pretty quick. But yeah, I feel like that is clarification. That's let's see. I guess it's a hint that yeah, she did shoot Miles. And we have the let's see. Yeah, just the fact that she spends most of the movie lying to other characters. That is her. That's the way that she is a femme fatale. And for most of it, it works. It really, like, it seems like only at the very end does Sam realize, at least, the extent of her lies. I get the sense that for a lot of it, he thinks that, let's see, Thursby shot Miles. Yeah, rather than that she did. I think that might just about cover. So yeah, I think it is interesting. Like, obviously, there's definitely some misogyny going on here. Sadly, par for the course for the time. But the women are never like just helpless. There's no female character in this entire movie that just breaks down and cries and is completely, which was the stereotype. Certainly in the 60s, that was the stereotype of like, yeah, women were seen as inherently weaker, not just physically, but also like as far as like constitution goes, which again, like, try childbirth. But yeah, I do quite appreciate it, because it would have been easy for at least one of them. One thing you can say is one aspect where it could be said that they're shown that, yeah, they're depicted as having a weaker constitution, is that several of them do betray Sam, including ones who say they love him. Effie never does. Effie really never, hardly ever makes a single mistake. Like, she's wrong. She thinks that Bridget is, a really good egg, but yeah, that turns out to be inaccurate. But other than that, she does, like, clearly Sam trusts her with a lot of things where, like, I think if misogynists made this movie today, a lot of those tasks would probably have been given to men or something. Now, I think that pretty well covers her. There's not that much to say about Mrs. Archer. I always mix up Miss and Mrs. I appreciate the reveal. Let's see. I'm pretty sure the cops say, you were, with her, before Archer died, and I don't think he ever says no to that. He says something like, "You sure spin a good story," and one of them says, "So you're saying you weren't with her?" And he says, "No, I was talking about this other thing," or something like that. And yeah, when she comes to see him, it is completely clear. Just gonna make sure if that is not something I have to deal with, right? Is that? Oh, right, yeah. That's not a. Right. Yes. So, yeah, it's clear from right away. Yes, the two of them were together, and we have this thing about that she thinks that he killed Miles so they could be together, 100%. And that is, like, I appreciate for sure. Before I get more into, I realize that a lot of people see it as worse when a woman cheats than when a man does, which, again, is just ridiculous. And like, I get, like, if you go back to, like, back before contraception, which I appreciate, when when this movie first came out, that wasn't quite as accessible, as more recently, but if you feel some need to believe, to feel confident that the children that you raise as a father, excuse me, I really did think that I cleared my throat sufficiently before recording. If you need to be certain that those kids share, have half of your DNA, which I personally don't think, yeah, I don't think we should place as much emphasis on that as we do. Obviously, in that case, you might, worry about if she is with others. But other than that, like, men are just as capable of catching and transmitting an STD. A lot of men have substantially more chances to cheat. I don't offhand remember the exact numbers, but someone did compare, the rates at which men and women cheat, and also look at some of the reasons, and I do think there was some telling stuff in there. Now, yes, so but yes, I appreciate that women are judged more and more harshly for it. But this is a movie where, like, the men are just as eager to, like, the Sam, over the course of this movie, kisses both Mrs. Archer and Bridget, and yeah, I did think I did mention at the, earlier I was going to talk some about the machismo. I would definitely say that this is a movie that creates a world where machismo gets results, but it's not saying that it makes you a good person, which is, I think, a really crucial distinction to make, because there are a lot of, American pieces of media that suggest that machismo is always good, and if you are, the more macho you are, the better of a man you are, the better of a person you are. But yeah, if you are a man, the better of a person you are. And yeah, I mean, this really isn't a movie about good triumphing over evil. It's a movie where, like, most of the major, a significant chunk of the major characters have their lives ruined by greed, and our protagonist went along with it until, he felt confident that because hypothetically he could have called the cops sooner. He called the cops when he felt confident that the bird was a fake. But yeah, and there at the end, he's not turning Bridget in because it's the ethical thing to do. He's doing it to save his own neck. So yeah, I quite appreciate that whole, yeah. Now, that, have I said what I really wanted to about Bridget? I think I do really appreciate the way that, there's a quote from Star Trek Deep Space Nine that goes, "Never tell the same lie twice." And Bridget keeps changing her story just enough. Each time she's caught in a lie, she changes her story in a way that sounds fairly credible. She says multiple times that she's lying to protect herself, and she simply thinks that this is the only way to go. And she also does, Sam identifies it as a schoolgirl act. Sometimes she'll be like, "I know you have no reason to trust me," and that sort of thing, to try to elicit sympathy. And let's see, yeah, I really appreciate that Sam straight up says, yeah, like he doesn't seem to have cared that much about Miles. One of the first things he does is have the name changed on the front. And when the cop is like, he had his bad sides, I guess he had some good ones too, and Sam just responds something like, "I guess," just. And I appreciate, in part, it's like the stoic badass guy, but he never really expresses, no matter, like, yeah, no matter who he's talking to, he never really seems that heartbroken about Miles' death. Now, one could interpret it as this sort of thing of like, maybe he just really so badly did want to be with Miles' widow, but I think it is just he's seen so much death, because throughout the movie he never seems disturbed by death. And in fact, it's so second nature that he's like, when he's trying to talk to, when they're figuring out exactly what to do, he has access to the Falcon. He's not sharing right now. Boys born with no natural inclination to share. And he says, "If you kill me, you can't get the Falcon. If you threaten to kill me, I know you won't do it. What else are you going to do?" And, Gutman says, "Oh, we have other ways." And he says, "Yeah, if you don't threaten with death, and I don't believe you're going to kill me, I'm not going to talk." That's how hardened he is to the concept of death. He's talking about it like it's nothing. Like, this is the way that, you or I might talk about, having to I don't know, spend, having to go to the having to spend a short amount of time in like jail or something. It's like, nothing less than that will make me cooperate, kind of thing, or so, just, yeah. And I think that might just about cover that. So I'll briefly talk about the book. So I almost said in the review itself, but I caught myself. Actually, yeah. So before I say the following, I am spoiling the book as well. So if you don't want that spoiled, skip ahead until you see me lower my index finger. So this follows the book pretty much exactly. There's very little that they changed, and I think that works really well. No more spoilers for the book. But yeah, this is not one of those, like, a lot of the time I prefer a rethinking kind of, adaptation rather than a direct, faithful adaptation. Here, I think it was very, very smart to go this way. And I think the changes that they made worked really well for the movie. I already mentioned Sam is described as looking like Satan. Bogey does not look like any depiction of Satan that I've seen. And his more, like, hardened features, like, he feels like he's lived a life. When you see Sam Spade, you feel like he's seen it all. Nothing gets to him. And that's very much the characterization. So, great bit of casting there. And let's see. I think the movie, the fact that we're told about the Falcon immediately, I don't necessarily think, from what I recall in the book, it is around the same time that it's mentioned to characters in the movie, and I think that might have been good. But I get that they maybe thought they needed a hook, and certainly it is one of those things where when you go between book and movie, from what I recall, it actually does, like the first scene of the book and the first scene of the movie are the same, and a lot of scenes in general are the same. When you pick up a book, as long as the first few lines hook you, you're gonna stick around, even if you don't know yet what the title means. But with a movie, yeah, there's perhaps less of it. One of the things is, if you at some point feel like, I need a little break from the story, a book, put a bookmark in, put it down, you can pick it up later, no harm done. When this came out, if you wanted to watch this movie, certainly, it had to be a movie theater. There was no pausing or rewinding or getting, leaving the theater, coming back and expecting it to just have paused where you left it. So they did really need to hook, but I think it is, I kind of wish they had thought to just, figured that, no, it's enough that we see the murder, and yeah, I really appreciate, just a few minutes in, Miles is shot, and I like the detail that, there is this slight smile that at the time we maybe don't think too much of. And, like, if we think, oh, it was Thursby, then maybe he's, like, trying to disarm Thursby by, like, saying, I wasn't following you. What? Me? No. What? No. But by the end, when we realize it was Bridget, that smile makes sense. And I think that might just about be... Yeah. I think this movie does such a good job of every so often we'll meet a brand new character and the plot thickens. This is very much... And I do appreciate, like, obviously, some people are going to look at this and say, it's just a bunch of people talking about this one thing that then turns out to not even be the thing they were going after. Nobody, hardly anyone, fights or shoots or anything like that, And yeah, it was just, it is very, you can tell it was based on a novel. This is not the kind of, if this had been written directly as a screenplay, no novel, today, it would have been a lot more visual, and there would probably, I could see them combining some characters. Like, I don't think that would necessarily benefit it, but I could see how an argument could be made for combining Wilmer and Cairo, for example. But yeah, yeah, I think that brings us nicely. So yeah, I think they do a really great job with Bridget, how every so often she'll just disappear or not answer the phone, these sorts of things. And, suddenly she'll say, oh, the place was ransacked. And, like, there is this very pervasive sense of danger. Excuse me, I wouldn't necessarily say that I thought that Sam would, personally end up hurt, but yeah, Bridget, for a lot of it, you do believe that at least some of what she's saying is true. And I mean, certainly they could kill other people. They do kill Jacoby, who, didn't do anything wrong, and yeah, you know what? Before I talk too much more about the characters, I do want to briefly talk thematic, because I'm a little bit more worried I'll forget it. So, yeah, forget to talk about that. I know some people think that the movie is pointless because it ends with the reveal that this wasn't the Falcon. One argument could be, well, technically the Falcon is supposedly out there. You know, what was it? Kemidov presumably still has it. I think that it is important for the movie that the thing that, you know, Gutman spent 17 years looking for, he's willing to sacrifice Wilmer, who's like a son to him, who, you know, on occasion he does have to be, you know, father figure and, you know, tell him, stand down, Wilmer. Which, saying that name aggressively just doesn't hit as hard if you're not, you know, kicking a door after coming home from eating gigantic ribs. But yeah, he sacrifices it. You know, it doesn't take very much convincing. At first he says, no, I won't hear it. And Sam pushes a little and he's like, I can have another son. But 17 years, you know, several dead people, and it was all for nothing. You know, like they think that they're going to be able to get the Falcon, but Sam puts a stop to that. Yeah, all of that, and they get nothing. They get absolutely nothing out of this whole ordeal, and have sacrificed so much just because of greed, because it you know, the you'll forgive me for saying, I don't get the sense that Gutman is like strapped for cash if he's offering 10 grand. You know, he says, I can't raise any more in a short amount of time. Yeah, that, you're not exactly like Oliver Twist, dude. So, yeah, all of this just because of greed. And I love the acting in that final set. Just these close-ups of the faces, and they're all like, you know, amazing. And the sweat on Gutman's brow, and he, you know, he cuts into it, and the frustration that when he realizes it's not the right, you know, he like, let's say, he checks his pulse. He's completely, you know, he's so distraught over it. And you know, yeah, within like a minute or two, he's like, well, you know, what's one more year? You know, he's not at all deterred. He doesn't stop and think, what have I done? What have I become? You know, all these people who are dead because of me, all this wasted time, you know, and yeah, it's gonna cost him significantly more time because he's arrested by the end of the movie. And yeah, I personally think it delivers that message incredibly well. And this was a very popular message in film noir, an anti-greed message, crime doesn't pay message. And it is, of course, it is one of those things where, you know, one can understand why the idea of becoming rich was extremely popular right after during and after the Great Depression. And it's one of those things of like, it's really, really gross to have someone rich preach to poor people that they should just accept being poor, you know, and certainly the studio had money, but some of the people working on it really didn't, and I've never heard of them like expressing that they thought that they were like selling, that they were race traders or something, you know. I think before I talk characters, I do want to briefly talk about the gender politics. And actually, yes, the very first thing, I know, jumping all over the place, ADHD. And I do actually have that diagnosis. I'm not just saying that. Yes, so and medication didn't work. It made it worse. So I'm not on any now. The fat phobia, you know, I find it interesting. There's no doubt. There's definitely some fat phobia on display. Gutman, you know, yeah. For, you know, there's these ideas of greed, for example, and just lower moral character and such. You know, he's not the only one, but I will get to some of the other, you know, characters who are of low moral character in this, why that is, you know. But yeah, I think it's noteworthy how fat phobia has changed, because it hasn't changed in how it views overweight people as such. It judges them and says that they are inherently inferior to people who are not overweight. And this despite, these days when people want to try to hide that they're fat phobic, they'll talk about, oh, I'm just worried about their health. It's bad to be so overweight. Even though, obsessing over your appearance, like, there's a lot of people who don't actually have, who aren't overweight at all, but maybe they have a little bit of a belly or something, and they're not actually, yeah, they are deemed as fat because there's people making a lot of money off, dieting products, exercise, these various kinds of products. It used to be that being plus sized was a sign of success. You could afford enough food to gain weight, and people admired it. Now, if you're thin, but if you're a woman, you should also be curvy, because this is ridiculous. Yeah. I don't blame women for trying to become like that. I blame, these ridiculous patriarchal standards. And these standards have changed a lot over the years. But yeah, today, you have to be thin, maybe also curvy. That's a sign of success, because that means you can, anyone can afford, not anyone, a lot of people. Obviously there are some people who do struggle to get enough to eat, and that's something we definitely have to do something about. We need taxpayer money put towards that. But, and before you ask, tax the rich and cut, if you're in America, cut the bloated military budget. That's how you get that kind of money. But let's see, yeah, a lot of people can afford food that makes you gain weight, because fast food is very prevalent, which, was less back when it was seen as a status symbol to be plus sized. It wasn't the case. And yeah, if you can't afford, personal trainer, dieting, these sorts of things, maybe some surgery, yeah, it's much harder, not necessarily to reach, healthy, body weight, although for some people that is also difficult. There's, it's not about, oh, they're just lazy, why can't they stop eating? Some people have an extremely difficult time losing weight, and it's not any of their own fault. And some people really struggle to get the motivation. Some people can't exercise without having to go to a gym, and if you are overweight, going to a gym means a lot of people who are very fit are going to stare at you, and that makes it much more difficult for you to go to that gym. And let's see, but yeah, yes, so right, the thing that I wanted to get to, some people today, if they're trying to hide that they're actually fat phobic, they might say, I worry about the health. Well, the thin people, if you're too thin, that's actually going to kill you quicker than if you're, overweight. If you're, overweight to the point where it is killing you, yeah, it's gonna take longer. And no, smokers, that does not cost as much taxpayer money as dealing with smoking. I get that, it's an addiction and that sucks, and I want you to get help, but stop using that ridiculous argument. There are ways out of, tobacco addiction. Now, and certainly, if you're judging overweight people for having weight issues, why are you talking about, yeah, if you, it's not okay either if you don't have any vices. Well, nobody has no vices, but yeah, there's a saying about, to deal with the, was it like wooden board in your own eye before you deal with the the splinter in your neighbor's eye, something like that. And just like be supportive instead of, you know, I get caring. I'm not saying don't care, but be supportive instead. You know, there's a lot of things you can do to support people who are trying to lose weight or beat an addiction, that sort of thing. Now, and obviously, if you are struggling with addiction, there, you know, please contact someone. The sooner you start trying to beat the addiction, the better. Now, yes. So back to, you know, the specific tropes about how overweight people are perceived. You know, the core of them was the same, or a lot of the way, at least back when this movie was made compared to today. But it doesn't really have a lot of the same stereotypes. You know, today it's more, you know, if you see in a piece of media some like negative depiction of an overweight person, you know, it's going to be stuff like, oh, you know, they're always eating, or they eat stuff that is disgusting, they refuse to do any exercise, they move slowly, when they move they move in a way that's deeply affected by their weight, stuff like this. And none of that is here, you know. And they I suppose it's possible censorship. I know there were some very silly rules around this time for censorship. It's possible that at least some of that couldn't have been done, but again, you know, if you look at other like old comedy from around this time, yeah, sometimes you would have like an overweight person moving in a funny way if they were, you know, yeah, if it was in a slapstick comedy, you know. But one thing they do is put the camera, you know, angle the camera so that Gutman sometimes takes up the entire frame. And that's actually an interesting, because he makes him very imposing. And, you know, obviously there's this sort of suggestion there that an overweight person is more physically intimidating, like by their nature. But it is also like, it doesn't really make him look like silly as such, you know. So I don't know, I find it interesting how it's changed. And yeah, you know, he moves decently fast. Like, you know, there's the thing about checking his pulse, but I mean, does he really look that much worse than some of the thinner people in these scenes? I don't know that I would necessarily say that, but yeah. And yeah, that does segue nicely into, so yeah, I suppose it does really go for Gutman as well. Really, every male, like, antagonist character in this. So, Gutman, Wilmer, Cairo, and... oh, wait, are the... right, those are... yeah. Wow. Yeah, the three of them are definitely gay-coded. You know, this came out at a time when you couldn't come out and say, this character's gay. And it is kind of hilarious that they managed to sneak the word gunsel in, because someone who was like approving it thought, oh yeah, this, you know, it's like slang for a man with a gun, right? No, it was slang for gay lover. So yeah, when Sam says, keep your gunsel out of my way, you know, he's saying, I know you're gay. And they don't exactly deny it, you know. And yeah, it is perhaps especially visible in Cairo, and just Peter Lorre, fantastic performance. He's also spellbinding in M. Like, you gotta watch. If you, like, really, as long as you can stomach it, which I appreciate not everybody's going to, you know, it's about very, very sordid subject matter, but other than that, you know, like, yes, you know, it's black and white, and it's not made in the exact way that movies are made today, but really, other than that, it really is, like, if that's just stuff you know, it's a good thing to try to get past that. You know, I do appreciate not everybody has my kind of context. You know, when I was a kid, my parents showed me movies from a lot of different decades. You know, I did watch, you know, yeah, really, really old stuff even as a kid. So for me, it's not that much of a leap, you know. And I get, you know, if nobody introduced you to these, it can be difficult to know where to start. But I do think that it is enriching. It is personally enriching to view these and compare and contrast and see, you know, oh, we used to do this. I guess we could come back to it. Like, I I think there's a lot of plus-sized individuals who might prefer the stereotypes from this movie to be in more recent movies compared to some of the other. Because one of the things is, if every time you see an overweight person in a piece of media, they're like eating really aggressively, then if you see a person who even looks overweight in public and they're eating, even if they're not like eating a lot, you might subconsciously think, oh, they're eating way too much, when no, that's not at all what you're seeing. You're just seeing a person eating. Like, we kind of need that to live, but it's been, you know, there's this subconscious bias now. And obviously, ideally, we should get entirely away from these. I'm not saying you can't depict an overweight person as having flaws, but we got to get away from this idea of all overweight people being inherently flawed for being overweight. Now, so yes, the gay coding on Cairo is quite, yeah. I think if you manage to watch this entire movie, at some point you're probably gonna clock him as, yeah, that he's supposed to be gay, isn't he? Unless you don't know what, you know, that gay people exist, I guess, or yeah. But at one point, you know, he's got the cane, and at one point, like, he caresses part of it. Some of the outermost, he's got like a handkerchief. The way he talks can sometimes be somewhat effeminate. Sam very easily overpowers him and tells him, when I slap you, you'll take it and like it, which is the kind of thing that a man might say to a woman back then, which is also obviously wrong. But yeah, these are, yeah. And the fact that Wilmer also struggles with, you know, it's very clearly saying gay men are less manly than straight men, which, you know, that there is that stereotype. There's a lot of times where that isn't even remotely true. Some of the most hypermasculine men are not necessarily gay, but certainly not straight. And hypermasculinity actually does appeal to a number. You know, it's there's a lot of propaganda that appeals to like hypermasculinity that, you know, today comes across as not straight, because yeah, and there's not, you know, obviously there's nothing wrong with not being straight, but yeah, it is one of those things. If you go really far in one direction, you actually end up appealing to the people you were trying to not appeal to. I think, yeah, I really appreciate how the movie, like, gradually Sam will meet more people that are involved in trying to get the Falcon, and there's just enough to set them apart, because, like, at the end of the day, like, a lot of the people in this movie are involved with the Falcon in one way or another. And, you know, this is one of those things where, like, if you know, yeah, movies today might show some of these people doing other things than pursuing. I think it works here because it's like this single-minded thing. Like, we never see them show an interest in anything else, you know. But on account of that, it is important that there's just enough, you know, distinguishing aspects of them. And yeah, the way they approach Sam are very distinctly different. You know, like, Cairo's not the only one to offer money, but yeah, the way that, and you know, it's not only when he is directly involved that a gun is being pointed at Sam, but you do get the sense that, like, Cairo, I think, actually, Gutman comes across as if he has control over a situation. You know, he talks, but he doesn't reveal anything that he doesn't feel comfortable revealing yet. And Cairo, like, almost immediately gets his gun out, you know. And Wilmer is also very eager to use a gun. You know, he's very keen on proving his masculinity, which again is a trope about, you know, oh, gay men, they're not masculine enough, so they're constantly trying to prove their masculinity, which is again you know, it amuses me because there's a lot of straight men. Like, I'll grant I haven't actually, like, in real life, on YouTube it's different, but in real life I have not encountered very many people who were gay, or maybe I just wasn't able to realize that they were gay. Maybe they hadn't realized they were gay at the time, but I've encountered quite a few straight guys. You know, when I was a teenager, like, I don't think I knew a single non-straight guy, and a lot of the guys in school were constantly trying to assert their masculinity and be dominant, and, like, so it is one of those things. But I do appreciate the movie does contrast that with Sam's effortless masculinity. He doesn't even have to try. He is just that cool just by, you know, there at the end, you know, he shows a slightly softer side when he's talking about, you know, maybe she loves him, maybe he loves her, kind of thing, you know. But it does take a lot, and I do really appreciate that it is actually, it's not that the movie is saying that that's good. Like, this is essentially a broken man in a broken world, and the movie doesn't suggest that things are going to get any better. The last time we see I can't believe I'm playing on her name, Bridget, yeah, she is, you know, I appreciate that, like, over the course of it, she looks vulnerable many times, but it's only at the very end that she looks truly and fully defeated. And we realize those other times, a lot of it was an act, you know. And here at the end, we're seeing she is terrified of prison. But her greed got the better of her, and it is very much saying, you know, Sam wasn't, you know, killing people. He didn't spend anywhere near as much time as, you know, the overweight man, the gay men, and the woman, you know. So it is very much saying, you know, even a man who isn't completely good, as long as he's, you know, this stoic masculine guy who isn't gay and isn't overweight, then he'll be able to resist the temptation. And that's also something, like, if they made a version today, I think it would be interesting if the femme fatale was actually a good person who, you know, basically, like, yeah, it was, you know, like, they could do something to make it clear, no, she never killed, you know, she's only killed in self-defense. She would never kill someone that was close to her. Perhaps it's men who kill the men close to her to, you know, criticize patriarchy. And I think the at least one of the, you know, men going after the Falcon and like spending all this time and killing people and such, or you know, being involved with killing people, not showing any remorse for people who are killed and such. At least one of them should be like an alpha to criticize that, because a significant chunk of all the worst things in the world are done by insecure men with frail egos who have to prove how tough they are. And let's see, I think that does, right, yes. So yeah, the last we see of Bridget, I like the line about, you know, she's got too many names. I don't care if she has all the names in the phone book. And also the fact that she does keep giving them fake names. You know, only the third time that she says her name does she give the actual name, because she doesn't want them to get too close. She wants to be able to control the flow of information. And yeah, yes, the very last we see of her, she looks defeated. She's steps into the elevator, and as the door is pulled close, door, whatever it's called, is pulled close. Notice that the guy who's there, the cop who's there with her, is almost entirely out of frame. We just see her face, and we see bars, basically the steel bars of prison in front of her. We don't even have to see her in an actual prison. That tells us that that's yeah. And right, I really love how much of this movie is basically like it's sort of a mix between poker and like expert chess, because everyone is like trying to catch someone else bluffing, trying to bluff the others, and making these very tactical moves. A lot of it is like verbal. It's stuff they threaten with, or it's information they offer or deny, stuff like that. Might that actually be about... let's see. I feel like there's something else that I really wanted to get into, but what exactly it was is eluding me. Right. Apparently, let's see. Sidney Greenstreet. This was his first movie. Like, it's amazing. Like, obviously not his first acting performance. That would have been ridiculous. But he was, like, stage actor. He 100% sells it. Like, people who've tried both or just spend enough time witnessing both will tell you those are two very different styles of acting. You cannot do the same exact kind of acting. It's the difference between playing to the back row and getting a close-up. It's very, very different. And yeah, he absolutely nails it. And I believe he worked with, I think, yeah, both he and Laurie worked with Bogart after this one, because everyone wanted more, understandably. I really appreciate that really it is only at the very, very end that you 100% know the details of the mystery. Like, you cannot figure out everything until the very, very end. And it is this, we get plausible explanations along the way. The first time I watched this, I did not at all think that Bridget had killed anyone, much less Miles, who maybe thinks she's a bit posh. But that was also a phenomenal line. His first thought is, this is fake money, right? This is like Prince's. He checks it. Nope, it's definitely real. And then we get the line, it had brothers in her wallet. Just phenomenal. And the detail about, she paid more than she would have if she were telling the truth, but so much more that it didn't matter. Yeah, that might actually be everything. Yeah, I've seen some say that, the bird being delivered, there at the end is extremely convenient. And it is really, like, they didn't know what else, how else do you, proceed the story. And yeah, it is quite convenient. And the let's see. Yeah, I'm not gonna claim that I know exactly how else, how do you otherwise, yeah. And ultimately, it is explained why he went there, and yeah, And I think, yeah, the right. I really appreciate how the cops every so often will, grill Sam. And yeah, we find out, one of the times it's because, you know, uh, Miles' widow, sent them because she was jealous. And the yeah, Sam, there is a slightly, he doesn't exactly give everything, but unlike that guy, the Russian general from Start of the Avengers, but yeah, he does. He's good at giving just a little bit of like, just enough information or hint of what it could be, that sort of thing. And right, let's see. Yeah, I quite like the first thing we learn about Sam is he'll want to see this girl whether she's a customer or not because she's a knockout. And we have the I think, yeah, the thing with, he has a wife and 3 children in England. They usually do, not always in England. And I think that might, yeah, I'm not gonna quote every single Gutman line because it's just like he opens his mouth and just something amazing comes out every single time. Just I love the way that he's slowly but surely evaluating Sam. Every single thing that Sam says or does is analyzed. And yeah, the let's see, we have the let's see. No, yeah, I think that does pretty much cover. Like everything else is just me quoting a line of dialogue and saying I really love that that line of dialogue. Like I don't think there's a single bad line of dialogue in this entire thing. I find it quite amusing when Sam puts down, attacks the masculinity of Cairo and Wilmer. Like I already, I talked about how I think it's, it's problematic, but I do think there's some really great, the thing about, he gets the guns away from Wilmer and claims, Newsy got them from him, so I made the Newsy give the guns back, something like that, just, yeah. I think that might cover, yeah, I seriously respect, like, I think the last really major character you meet in this movie, it's like halfway through, and that's also only then that you get like the full backstory of the Falcon. I think that might just be it. So yeah, I really appreciate, it doesn't have, yeah, so the climax, it's an emotional climax, but it's not like a climactic action scene or something. But yeah, that last little bit where Sam, the others have left, he calls the cops and, he says, the cops are going to be here any minute. We have to settle this, and he underlines, I'm not taking the fall for what you did, and I can't trust you, And, I've mentioned that that's a misogynistic trope. For sure, trust is extremely important in a relationship. Now, but yeah, that whole bit where he gets to the truth and she keeps trying to avoid telling him the full truth. And let's see, yeah, I think I have said everything about that. But yeah, it is by far the most intense conversation in the entire movie, and it is a movie of conversations. And yeah, let's see. I think yeah. Um, there, right before Gutman leaves, he feels confident that Sam isn't going to call the cops. Because they're so in this together, and very clever with the thing about the money. He says, I'll keep this for expenses, and then he hands it over to the cops. Says they tried to bribe me. Very, very clever. And also just the way that the money every so often, once the 10 grand in the envelope, it's given to Bridget, and she hands it. She agrees to give it to Gutman, who says, "There's one bill missing." And Sam confronts Bridget, and she's like, "No, I didn't take it." And then Sam's like, "But you did, didn't you, Gutman?" "I did. It was a little joke." Just these little, yeah. And yeah, they're so greedy, they're so obsessed that they can't take their eyes off each other. And when they get so enthralled with the bird, they don't even notice that the Gunsel leaves. So yeah, it's genuinely done. It's caused a lot of harm, even beyond the deaths and the wasted time. And I don't think that it's by accident that when Sam does kind of break down, like it's not a full, he doesn't like break something or do something. I mean, I think it is reasonable for him to not trust her. I don't think in real life we should try to trust women, but this particular character, she has shown she doesn't deserve trust. And yeah, he's talking about all the reasons, the stuff the reasons to not trust her and the reasons to trust her. And yeah, he's essentially breaking down. I don't think it's random that happened after the bird was revealed to be fake. And she does also say, would this have been different if the bird had been real? And I think that does right. Yes. So yeah, Gutman. Right before he leaves, he leaves behind the bird, and he says something like, you can keep this as a memento of our time together. I'm probably gonna butcher it, and I couldn't really find it in the IMDb quote section, but I think he says something like Aris Bana or something. Look at this guy trying to make his argument with Harry Potter words. It's Latin. If you're not already, subscribe to Alisanvia. That's where I got that. That is like she's great. That really is truly amazing, and obviously the original. I think she said it was something like, she used the Latin phrase for a fallacy, one of the logical fallacies that people sometimes use when trying to argue something, and yeah, someone thought it was Harry Potter words. So yeah, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, next one should be next Wednesday, and the other, I try to do at least one video per day, and these days it is, it's a Marvel live action show, and right now I'm let's see, about halfway through second season of Cloak and Dagger. So yeah, hope to catch you on one